Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman for the National Public Diplomacy Directorate here in the office of the Prime Minister. It's Monday, the 10th of February, day 493, since the start of the October 7th war. Quick update from me, and then we will take your questions at the end. With the return of the Prime Minister from the US, I wanted to reiterate Israel's goals in this war. They've been clear since the October 7th, when Hamas perpetrated the worst massacre on Jews since the Holocaust. Firstly, they're the release of all of our hostages. Secondly, destroying Hamas's governing and military capability. And thirdly, ensuring that Gaza does not become a threat to Israel again. And number four, the return of the residents of Israel's north safely to their homes. These remain our objectives in this war. On our fallen soldiers, the number of which has unfortunately risen to 846, Sergeant First Class in the Reserves Nadav Cohen was aged 21 years old and from Beit Hanan. He fell in battle in northern Gaza. And Staff Sergeant Nachman Rafael Ben Ami was aged just 20 and from Eilat. He too fell in battle in northern Gaza. There are no words of mine that can assuage the pain of their parents and their families. We embrace them and those dear families who have lost their precious heroes, sons and daughters in this war for our very existence. This war has exacted a heavy cost from all of us, none more so than the families of our soldiers and especially our fallen soldiers. But as the Prime Minister has said, I promise you, with unity, with determination and with faith in the justice of our cause, we will fight, and with God's help, we will win. May their memories be a blessing forever. Excuse me. Next, as you know, the Prime Minister returned last night from his historic visit to Washington, D.C. with President Trump. He met with senior figures in the administration as well as Senate and congressional leaders. The purpose of all of these meetings was to ensure the security of Israel for future generations. The Prime Minister was not exaggerating when he spoke of opportunities and possibilities not dreamed of hitherto. Thanks to the bravery and the sacrifice of Israel's armed forces, yes, to the soldiers who have fallen, but also the resilience of Israel's people, coupled with the government's determined and rational war aims set out on October 8th, 2023. President Trump himself particularly commended the breaking of the Iranian axis. The US and Israel are in agreement that all the war objectives must be met. The elimination of Hamas, the return of all of our hostages, ensuring that Gaza cannot again constitute a threat to Israel, and returning all of the residents in the north and the south, and of course, preventing Iran from attaining nuclear weapons. President Trump also presented a different vision for the day after. For a full year now, we've been told that the PLO, or the Palestinian Authority, needs to be in Gaza. President Trump's completely different vision is as revolutionary as it is creative, and President Trump is very determined to carry it out. Next, on the hostage release agreement, on Saturday, the fifth phase of the hostage release agreement took place. Our civilians, Ohad Ben Ami, Or Levy, and Eli Sharabi were released. 491 days. I think Israelis and right-thinking people the world over can have had no other thought. They resembled the Jews of Dachau concentration camp on its liberation by the US Armed Forces in 1945. Barbarism from 1945 and barbarism in 2025. Inhumane. The government of Israel has made clear this will not go unaddressed. Negotiations to take forward the next stage continue. An Israeli delegation of a negotiation team has left Israel for Qatar. Next, on Israel's expanded operation against terrorism in northern Samaria, our armed forces are taking forward proactively their extensive anti-terrorism operation. Dozens of terrorists have been eliminated, hundreds of wanted terrorists were arrested, infrastructure used for terrorism has been attacked from both the air and the ground. Israel is clear there will be no safe havens for terrorists in Judea and Samaria. With force, Israel will thwart terrorists throughout the entire region, particularly in northern Samaria, where so many murderous attacks have been launched. And finally, to the ceasefire with Lebanon, Israel continues to insist that the agreement is fully enforced. The key word here is enforcement. Israel will thwart any threat to or risk to its sovereignty and to the safety of our people. We insist that the goal of the war, the return of the residents to their homes safely, will be made possible and fully implemented. That's the end of our briefing today. We'll now take a couple of questions. Question here on Iran and comments made by President Trump regarding Iran. Thank you for that question. On Iran, our Prime Minister has made clear over the years that Iran cannot be allowed to achieve a nuclear weapon. President Trump agrees with this. Israel supports President Trump's maximum pressure campaign. It was working before it was interrupted. This campaign has two elements. Number one, crippling sanctions, and number two, a credible military threat to counter Iran's nuclear ambitions. This strategy has deterred Iran until the pressure was removed. So Israel, and the Prime Minister made this crystal clear in Washington last week, I heard it with my own ears, Israel welcomes the restoration of the maximum pressure campaign. President Trump and the Prime Minister see eye to eye on the Iranian nuclear threat. These maximum pressure policies are being restored, which means that Israel's long-standing position that Iran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon mean that Israel will do whatever it has to do to prevent that from coming to pass. Okay, another question I can see here regarding Israel's goals in Gaza. Let me share with you what the Prime Minister made clear in Washington last week. Israel's goals in this war have been clear since October 7th when Hamas perpetrated the worst massacre on Jews since the Holocaust. They are, of course, the return of all of our hostages. Secondly, they're destroying Hamas's governing and military capability. And, of course, ensuring that Gaza does not become a threat to Israel again. Now, these remain our objectives in this war. The Prime Minister, the President Trump, and Steve Witkoff, his chief negotiator, have all spoken, and they are working together. There is no daylight between the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and President Trump. Now, on our hostages, let me just make this point. We will not rest until we get them all out. Okay, another question here I can see on the phase 2 of these permanent ceasefire negotiations and what has been decided. Okay, let me answer that question. Thank you for that. On the phase 2 discussions for a permanent ceasefire, we're having these discussions with our US partners. They have begun. In reality, I can share with you that these discussions have never really ended. Yes, we believe these discussions will be difficult, but Israel is committed to getting our hostages home and achieving all of the other war aims. We will not end the war until all of our goals are met. And as, of course, for the ultimate goal, it is, of course, a permanent ceasefire. Prime Minister made this very clear last week. Hamas must not be in power. Gaza must be demilitarized and de-radicalized. And President Trump's plan, which he shared with the world, has made that clear as well. Okay, another question here regarding the achievements in this war against terrorism, and what are they from Israel's perspective? Thank you for that question. Israel's achievements in this war have been nothing short of tremendous. Hamas has been massively degraded. 20,000 of their terrorists have been eliminated. 90% of their rocket capability has been destroyed. Hezbollah's leadership has been largely wiped out, and its strategic capabilities have been massively degraded. Now, we know that Iran has been weakened. Its missile defenses seriously degraded. Its long-range missile production has been set back, and their vulnerability has been exposed. We know as well that all of this has led to the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria. Iran had a foothold in Syria using their proxy Hezbollah. Now, thanks to the heroism, thanks to the bravery, and thanks to the sacrifice of our brave soldiers and our armed forces, Israel is reshaping the Middle East. All of this, Prime Minister's made clear, will result ultimately in a more peaceful future, but we are not there yet. Okay, another question I can see here regarding the ceasefire in the north and our objective in Lebanon and also with Syria. Okay, thank you for that question. When it comes to the north, our objective is crystal clear. It has been to get our people safely back into their homes. No country would ask for anything less, to allow their own people to go back and live peacefully in their homes in Israeli sovereign territory. So, right now, yes, it is safe for our people to return to their homes in the north, but it's, of course, their decision. Israel's not just after quiet in our north. Israel will enforce this ceasefire. That is the difference between where we are now and where we have been in the past. The word is enforcement. It's about enforcement. And I'll be clear, and the agreements make this clear, there should be no Hezbollah between our border and the Litani River. Okay, another couple of questions, one about Syria and the situation in Syria. We're repeating the question just now. When it comes to Syria, Israel's made clear, and the Prime Minister again made this clear in Washington last week, that we won't let Syria become a staging ground for attacks against us. Our forces will remain in the key positions they're on now, along our border with Syria for as long as necessary to protect our security. We know precisely the heritage of the forces which have taken over Syria. Our eyes are wide open. We have no wish whatsoever to interfere internally in Syria, but we know the providence of the forces which have taken over Syria. They welcomed the October 7th massacre. That is clear to us, which is why we will do whatever is necessary to protect our citizens. Okay, another question here I can see from regarding our hostages and the situation regarding our hostages, how many we believe are alive, and another question about the ones that have been released. Okay, thank you for that question. The Prime Minister made clear last week that we've brought home more than 70%, I think 75% of our hostages now alive from October 7th. But the Prime Minister's also made clear that we will not leave anyone behind. And this is the final question regarding whether Israel believes that President Trump's plan for Gaza is realistic, having been criticized by other nations in the region. Okay, look, when it comes to, thank you for that question, firstly. Look, when it comes to President Trump's plan, which he shared with the world in some detail on Tuesday, and more detail following that on Wednesday and subsequently, the Prime Minister has made clear that this region needs some out-of-the-box thinking. So simply repeating the same failed policies will get us no closer to a resolution. So we here in Israel, and the government of Israel, and the Prime Minister has made this clear, we welcome President Trump's out-of-the-box thinking. Our Prime Minister has made clear that throughout the world, very often when the President makes suggestions, they are, in the first instance, leave people scratching their heads. But then the penny drops, and they actually make sense. And we believe this is a classic example. President Trump's out-of-the-box thinking is most welcome. We do not wish to be fighting this war again in 18 months or 2 years' time. Hamas being in power, keeping Gazans that wish to leave, blocking them from being able to leave through Egypt or to other countries in our region is simply not a sustainable resolution. So we very much welcome President Trump's out of the box thinking. Okay, so that's the last question we've got here. Thank you for joining us. We'll have another briefing again, no doubt, shortly. In the meantime, you can reach us in the usual way. Please do stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.